There are some things you grow up hearing that you never really believe. Stories your grandparents tell you on cold nights. It might be warnings about places you should not go. Things that sound like fairy tales until they are not. I learned the hard way that sometimes those old stories are true. We live on the edge of Renfield, a tiny town with a total population of 732 if you count the dogs. Not much happens here. Most people know each other by name. The kind of place where you leave your doors unlocked and nobody bothers you. But there is one thing about Renfield that has always made people nervous. Our church bells ring every Halloween at midnight. Even though the tower has been boarded up for years, nobody goes near that church anymore. The wood is rotten and the windows are all broken. My grandma used to tell me stories about it when I was younger. She would sit in her rocking chair with her tea and say, "That is when the Renfield visitor comes walking." I never believed her. I thought it was just something old people said to scare kids. But last Halloween changed everything. We had a storm that night, the worst one I had seen in years. The wind was so hard it bent our mailbox nearly in half. Trees were swaying like they were about to snap. Rain was coming down in sheets, hitting the windows so loud you could barely hear yourself think. The power went out around 11:45. My mom lit some candles and told me to stay inside, while she went to get more from the kitchen. I sat in the living room, watching the candlelight flicker on the walls. The house was making all kinds of creaking sounds from the wind. Then, right at midnight, the church bells started ringing. Even through the storm, you could hear them clear as day. Long, slow rings that seemed to echo through the whole town. I felt my skin go cold. Mom was still in the kitchen. I heard her moving around, opening drawers. Then everything went quiet for a moment. Too quiet. That is when she screamed. I jumped up and ran toward the kitchen as fast as I could. When I got there, the back door was wide open. Rain was pouring in, soaking the floor. The wind was howling through the doorway. Mom was standing there, staring out into the darkness, her hand over her mouth. "What happened?" I shouted over the storm. She turned to look at me. Her face was white. Her hands were shaking. "Someone came in," she said. "He just walked right through the door." I looked outside, but I could not see anything. Just darkness and rain. "Who was it?" I asked. "I do not know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was tall, wearing old clothes. His face looked wrong somehow, like it was too pale, too still." "What did he want?" She swallowed hard. "He said he was here to see the old ones." Then he walked past me into the house. We searched every room, every closet, every corner. Nothing. Nobody. The man was gone. It was like he had never been there at all. We locked all the doors and windows and sat up the rest of the night, listening to the storm. When morning came, the storm had passed. Everything was quiet again. Mom went to make coffee while I started cleaning up the water from the kitchen floor. That is when I saw them. I saw those muddy footprints leading from the back door, through the kitchen, down the hallway, and into the living room. They stopped right in front of our picture wall. The wall where we kept all our family photos going back generations. I walked over slowly, following the prints. My heart was pounding. When I got to the wall, I noticed something immediately. One of the frames was empty. Grandma's photo was gone. The frame was still there, hanging crooked on the wall. But the picture inside it, the one of Grandma sitting in her rocking chair with her tea, was missing. Just gone. Mom came in and saw me staring at the empty frame. She did not say anything. She just stood there with her coffee cup, looking at where Grandma's picture used to be. We never saw that man again. We never found the photo either. But every Halloween since then, when those church bells ring at midnight, I make sure every door and window in the house is locked tight. Because now I know Grandma was not just telling stories. The Renfield visitor is real, and he came for her. My name is Ethan Ward, and what I'm about to share has stayed with me for years, buried somewhere in the back of my mind where fear sits and waits. There are some nights that changed me. Nights that make me question what is real and what is not. Because what happened to me on my Halloween night shift 2023 is something I have never been able to explain, and honestly, I am not sure I want to. I worked the night shift at the Riverside Hotel for 3 years, and I saw all kinds of people come through those doors. Businessmen, families on road trips, couples having affairs. You learn not to ask questions, just do your job. But what happened that Halloween night still keeps me up sometimes, like I cannot stop thinking about it even now. That was my last year on the night shift, and I was planning to quit in December and go back to school. I was counting down the days, honestly. The job was not bad, but working overnight messes with your sleep and your social life. You end up living on a different schedule than everyone else, and it gets lonely after a while. Halloween night was usually quiet at our hotel. Most people were out at parties or with their kids trick-or-treating, so we would get a few walk-ins, but nothing crazy. I was expecting an easy shift that fateful night, just sit at the desk, do some paperwork, maybe watch something on my phone during the quiet hours. Just before midnight, this man walked through the front doors, and he was probably in his 50s, maybe older. Hard to tell in any way. He was wearing a nice suit, a bit old-fashioned looking, and he had this tired but kind face, like someone who had been traveling for a long time. He walked up to the front desk and smiled at me and said, "Good evening, young man. I would like to check in, please." This was my work, so I pulled up the reservation system and asked, "Sure, sir, what name is the reservation under?" And he said, "I do not have a reservation. I am hoping you have a room available. It is my anniversary, and I promised I would be here." We had plenty of rooms open because Halloween was never a busy night for us. So I said, "No problem, I can give you a walk-in rate. How many nights, sir?" And he said, "Just one." I checked him in and assigned him room 211, which was his choice. It was a decent room on the second floor, and that was one of the most expensive rooms in our hotel by then. He paid in cash, which was a bit unusual, but not unheard of. Some people just prefer cash, you know. As I handed him the key card, he took it and looked at it for a moment, just stared at it like it meant something to him. Then he looked up at me with this expression I could not quite read. Grateful, maybe. Relieved. And he said, "Thank you. You are the first one to let me back in." I thought that was a weird thing to say on a night like this, but I just smiled and told him to have a good night. He nodded, picked up his small overnight bag, and walked toward the elevators. I watched him go, and something about the whole interaction felt off, but I could not put my finger on what it was. I just shrugged it off and went back to my paperwork. The rest of the night was uneventful. I did my rounds, checked a few late arrivals in, answered some phone calls, normal stuff. My shift ended at 7 a.m., and I went home without thinking about the man in room 211 again. The next morning, I got a call from my manager around 10 a.m., and she sounded confused. She said, "Hey, I need you to come back to the hotel. Something weird happened with one of your check-ins last night." I drove back still half asleep, and when I got there, my manager and 2 housekeeping staff were standing outside room 211, and the door was slightly open. I asked, "What is going on?" And my manager said, "Come look at this." I walked into the room and it looked like someone had stayed there. The bed was made, but you could tell someone had sat on it. On the nightstand were 2 wine glasses. One was empty but filled with blood stains. The other was still half full with red wine. The TV was on, but it was just playing static. That weird gray and white noise you get when there is no signal. I said, "Okay, so the guest left. What is the problem?" And my manager handed me the key card and said, "Housekeeping found this on the bed, and look at this." She showed me the check-in card from the night before, the one the guest had filled out when he arrived. I recognized it immediately because I had watched him write on it. But then she showed me the date on the card, and it said the 31st of October 1989. I stared at it and said, "That is not right. I checked him in last night. That date is wrong." "That is what we thought," my manager said. "But look at the handwriting." She pulled out our current check-in log from last night, the one I had used, and the handwriting was identical. Same loops on the letters, same slant, same signature. I felt my skin go cold, and I said, "That does not make sense. I saw him write it last night." My manager did not say anything. She just looked at me like she was waiting for an explanation I did not have. I walked over to the nightstand and looked at the wine glasses. The half-full one was sitting there with the wine still dark red, and I reached out and touched the glass. It was warm. Not room temperature, warm. Like someone had just been holding it. I asked, "How long has this room been empty?" And the housekeeper said, "I just came about 30 minutes ago to clean it, then saw this on the bed." I looked around the room again, and everything felt wrong. The static on the TV, the empty stained glass, the warm wine glass, the check-in card from 1989. I asked, "Did anyone see him leave?" And my manager shook her head and said, "No, not even the cameras caught him leaving. No one saw him in the hallways. It is like he just disappeared." Then my manager pulled out her phone and showed me the security footage from last night. We watched the front desk area around midnight. We watched the front doors, but there was no man with a small overnight bag. No one walked up to the desk. No one went to the elevators. It was just me, standing there alone, talking to no one, handing a key card to empty air, watching nothing walk away toward the elevators. But what keeps me scared till this day was what we saw next on the footage. The key card moved on its own to the elevator. It was even slotted into the room door to open it on the camera. But there was no man, just thin air doing everything. I quit on the spot. I did not even wait until December like I planned. I could not work another night shift in that hotel after that, and I have never been able to explain what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I think about what he said. "You are the first one to let me back in," like he had been trying to check in for years, and I was the only one who could see him. So there's this Halloween party I went to last October that I still cannot explain. The host was this guy named Trevor, who a friend of mine knew through work. He seemed cool at first, letting everyone use his space even though it was this old club building he had rented out for the night. The place was in the quiet part of the city, one of those buildings that used to be something back in the day but had been sitting empty for years. At first everything was normal. People were drinking, dancing, and having a good time. Trevor did not seem to mind the mess or the noise. But as the night went on, you could tell he was getting stressed out. More people showed up than he expected. The music was too loud. Someone spilled beer all over the old carpet. He kept asking people to stay out of certain areas, but drunk people do not really listen. About an hour into the party, I went looking for the bathroom, but I ended up in this back hallway that led to what looked like a basement entrance. There was a door at the bottom of some stairs, and it was covered in duct tape, like completely covered. Someone had also put up a handwritten sign that said, "Do not open." I figured it was just part of the Halloween decorations, trying to make it look creepy. So I went back to the party and did not think much of it. The night kept going. More people showed up. More drinks. More dancing. By 2 a.m., most of us were pretty wasted. That is when everything went wrong. I was in the main room when I heard shouting from the back hallway. A bunch of people were gathered around something. When I walked over to see what was going on, this guy named Marcus, someone I did not really know, was standing at the top of the basement stairs. He had ripped all the duct tape off the door and was holding the sign in his hand, laughing. "Let us see the real horror," he yelled. He was clearly wasted. Before anyone could stop him, he pulled the door open. I expected to see a normal basement, maybe some old furniture or boxes, but that is not what we saw. Although there was a staircase, but it was not like the stairs we were standing on. This one was made of stone, dark, wet stone, and it went down, way down, further than it should have. The air that came out of that doorway was cold, so cold you could see your breath, and it smelled wrong, like dirt and something else I could not place. Marcus started going down the stairs. A few other people followed him, maybe 4 or 5 of them. They were laughing and joking, saying stuff like, "This is so cool, and I bet there is a haunted room down there." I stayed at the top with a few other people. Something about that staircase did not feel right. The way it just kept going down into darkness. The way the walls looked wet even though the rest of the building was dry. Their voices echoed as they went deeper. Then the laughter started fading, getting quieter and quieter. Then it stopped completely. We waited. Nobody said anything. We just stood there, staring down into that dark staircase, waiting for them to come back up. They did not. After about 10 minutes, someone finally yelled down the stairs, "Marcus, you guys okay?" No answer. Just the kind of silence that felt wrong. Josh, the guy who invited me, said he was going to go check on them, but before he could take a step down the stairs, we heard it. Knocking. Not from down the stairs, from under our feet, like someone was knocking on the floorboards from underneath. Slow, deliberate knocks. 3 of them. Then silence. We all looked at each other. Nobody wanted to go down there anymore. Josh decided to call Trevor, the guy who had rented the place. Trevor came down about 20 minutes later. When he got to the hallway, he stopped dead in his tracks. The door was gone. Not closed, gone. There was just a smooth wall where the door had been, like it had never existed. But we all saw it. We all watched Marcus open it. We all saw those people go down there. Trevor looked confused. He said there was never a basement entrance in that hallway. He said the building plans showed the basement was on the other side of the building. We tried to explain what happened, but he just shook his head. He said we were all drunk and imagining things. The party ended right there. Everyone left. But as I was walking out, I heard it again. That knocking, coming from somewhere under the floor. Like someone was trying to get out.